Guys, this is Jamie Masterson with Masterson and Bottenberg.
Yep.
Is that right? Works with Shane a lot, so Shane recommended him.
Yeah. So I got the topic today. We're going to kind of cover just some general LLC stuff, corporate stuff. Kind of short notice, so I don't like to have PowerPoints and handouts and all that jazz, but I figured we'll just kind of keep it real informal, down and dirty. So if you guys have questions as we go through some of this stuff, feel free to interrupt me. Any of this stuff can kind of be brought back into the conversation later. So there is no real format.
Are you an attorney or an accountant?
No, I'm an attorney.
Okay.
Yep. So I've been an attorney since 2013. Partner and I opened a bar firm right out of law school. Kind of a cool deal. We got bar results and were sworn in on Friday. We left the swearing in, filed our corporate documents, and then signed our first client on Monday. So we've been on our own since law school. We've done a really good job of trying to keep that entrepreneurial spirit alive. As far as who I am, again, I'm Jeremy Masterson. Married, 17 years. This August, actually. Hopefully she keeps me around a little bit longer. 2 kids. I've got a 10-year-old who will be a 5th grader this fall, and a 7th grader who will be in 2nd grade this fall. Yes.
So you did something else before you were an attorney?
Yeah, I've worn a lot of hats. I worked for Atlantic Bottling. I was a sales rep for those guys in the grocery side of the house. Did some time in the service. Was deployed back in 2004. Was with a recon unit out of Camp Dodge for a handful of years, and then my final time as an instructor out of Fort Des Moines. I've sold car parts, I've done bill collections, I've roofed houses. I've kind of done a lot of stuff. I'm what you would call a non-traditional student from the law school sense. I'm an Upper Iowa graduate, back when they were still behind the Valor Ballroom, so I did night classes after coming home from deployment, and then entered the program over at Drake Law School. As far as business law is concerned, I can geek out on this all day long. Another classmate of mine and I started the Business Law Society at the law school, and I really enjoy talking business. One of the reasons is you can create things. It's the closest you can come to almost giving life to something. Corporations, in essence, are really just a person. They've got the same rights. They can sue. They can be sued. Instead of a social security number, they get a tax ID number, but you're really creating something that can act for you, shield you from other things, or give you some protections. But from that standpoint, what we're going to focus on today is essentially LLCs. We can talk about some corporate structures as it relates to corporations, Incs. We can give a little bit of conversations to partnerships, limited liability partnerships. But the main focus from a time constraint standpoint is going to be limited liability companies. Ultimately, a limited liability company is exactly what it sounds like. It's a company that is with its sole purpose of limiting your liability. As far as parallels, a lot of people are familiar with corporations as it relates to boards of directors, shareholders. Those are just terms that seem to be in the daily vernacular for most folks. Instead of all of those things, an LLC has members. So it doesn't have shareholders, it has members. Instead of bylaws and shareholder agreements, it has an operating agreement. From there, the differences kind of end in a lot of ways. They're centered around increasing your liability protection by creating a separate entity for you to operate under. Act like a company, get treated like a company. My law partner likes to give a hurdler as a track analogy as it relates to the type of liability protection that it gives you. In that if something does go south, right, being in business, you're going to be sued. It's really not a matter of if, it's more a matter of when. And it's about setting up as many hurdles as you can for that individual that brings an action against you. If you're doing everything on your own, there may be the same tax benefits as far as pass-through taxation, the deductions that you can take and whatnot. But your personal liability doesn't really, isn't limited. They can go after your personal house, they can go after your car, they can go after your personal bank account. There's no hurdles for somebody to jump over to try to get to your assets individually. An LLC puts up a couple of hurdles to allow you to stand behind something so long as you follow the rules. Now, what are the rules of an LLC? First, you got to start one. The Iowa Secretary of State, we're really kind of blessed. We have a very good business climate here. The legislature has a very good understanding of what business law is. And as far as what types of components go into an LLC, I was one of the forefront states in how these things run. First thing is just to pick a name, right? Make sure that that name's not taken. The certificate of organization is the document that gets created to file with the Secretary of State's office. And from there, you've got an LLC. An operating agreement is something that comes next. And Iowa's LLC statute is what is known as a default statute, meaning that if you don't do something or spell something out in your operating agreement, then that Iowa law is going to be what is put in place. And the default statute, the actual LLC statute, is pretty easy to run. The benefits of an LLC as far as startup and moving forward is that they're very, very low maintenance organizations to create. Once it's created, there's not a whole lot that you have to do afterwards. A yearly meeting and then talk to your CPA. Now, as far as talking to your CPA as part of any good corporate strategy, you want to make sure that you've got your key players on deck. Think of it as legs of the table. You've got your banker, you've got your attorney, and you've got your CPA. And all of those individuals are going to provide specific roles and knowledge on specific topics. I don't give tax advice, but I can speak tax to a certain degree. I can tell the CPA the types of things that we need to look at, and I can have a conversation with the CPA to make sure that any corporate structure we create creates a positive tax benefit for the individual. Your tax rate, what your personal incomes are, how that personal income is derived, are there spouses' incomes that are involved, are there other companies, how did this money come to you? All of that's going to be the purview of the CPA. Your vehicle, right? Do you bring your vehicle into the company, or do you yourself just pay out of your company the car payment and the maintenance and the oil changes? Well, a lot of that's going to depend on what types of insurance you have. Bringing the vehicle into the corporation may require you to get a separate business line for your vehicle, but the deductions may be the same or similar. As far as ensuring that things are set up properly, the corporation side of the house is really, really easy. Realtors are in a unique position you guys are almost like independent contractors on steroids, right? You guys have to have, you gotta have a broker above you. But from that standpoint, you guys are locked into whatever agency you sell for, but you guys are really kind of hanging out on your own. You guys can do your own marketing stuff so long as it gets approved by the broker. You guys can do your own money stuff. You guys can partner up individually. You can have subsets, like little mini companies inside of mini companies. So long as it all flows back up through the broker, you guys are most of the time covered, which gives you guys a ton of flexibility because you could set up companies to do a marketing wing and find ways to fund that. That may give you a beneficial tax treatment, and it may help you to categorize and separate out one arm or avenue of your business. You may want to team up with another realtor. And in that situation, you both want to have companies, right? You both want to have an LLC because then each of your LLCs can join to create the big LLC. And it just gives you a very clean way to track that money. It gives you a very clean way to make sure that from point A to point B, there's a very, very delineated set of steps on how the money is going to go, who's going to do what from a marketing standpoint, what types of roles are going to be allocated between the individuals. Right? You guys know not every realtor is the same. Some people are really, really good at lead generation, but maybe not so good on the closing side. Some people may work better with one type of client, but not necessarily with another. So oftentimes, you guys build these silos of work, of referrals, of business, where the corporate structure can add a lot of value because now you can partner in teams while still maintaining your own independence and while still maximizing your liability protection. Questions up till this point? I could ramble on this stuff for
beginning.
I could ramble on this stuff for days. Well, and let's talk. We'll come back a little bit. So that's kind of like 30,000 foot view of an LLC. Why are LLCs a good idea? Well, the main reason they're a good idea is because they don't cost a whole lot to set up and maintain. Right? You figure a $50 filing fee is the hardest cost there is on the generation itself. Iowa Secretary of State's office, $50 to file the secretary or the certificate of organization. From that standpoint, and from that point on, the rest of it is just in attorney fees. Attorney fees for an LLC, simple LLC, range anywhere from $250, $300 up to $1,200, $2,000, depending on how complex you want to run stuff. Most of what realtors are doing from an LLC standpoint, you can take stuff directly off the shelf and use something kind of boilerplate and you know, off the rack, so to speak. Now, that means that your corporation, your LLC, is going to be limited in what it can do, right? Because the idea is to protect for what you're doing for. Now, you could create an LLC that you're going to use as your face, as your brand, as your identity from that standpoint for real estate. You could do anything else you wanted with that entity. The LLC, you could buy buildings, you could own rental properties, you could set up a leasing company. You're not limited to what that LLC can do. But the more things you want to do, the more things need to be identified in your operating agreement from a protection standpoint, right? Most realtors just need a very basic skeleton LLC because a lot of times all you need is liability protection and EIN, right? What that does is it almost sets up kind of an alter ego that you can then operate through. Oftentimes from a tax standpoint, the LLC and a sole proprietor just running stuff, a lot of the benefits can be similar, right? Because an LLC is what is known as a disregarded entity for tax purposes. Everything's passed through. Corporations pay tax twice, unless you're an S corp, right? Corporation pays tax and then you pay tax when you take the money out. An LLC, everything flows through that individual. But that flow through and that pass through, even if there's not a tangible tax benefit, is going to allow you a separate entity from an audit standpoint. Perhaps you can start renting space. You rent a section of your house back to your LLC. Perhaps all of your LLC pays for all of the marketing. Well, now you have one bank account. It never gets commingled with your personal assets. It's always under the company name. So if anything does go south or anybody tries to Monday morning quarterback down the road, it's very easy, right? You can just pull up your company and everything is in its own place with its own name, with its own identification number, with its own bank account. And, you know, that can limit some of the conversations that may happen down the road. Limited liability companies are also good just from the standpoint of limiting liability. If you are on your way to a showing and get into a car accident as an individual, does your car accident, are you doing that on behalf of the business? Do I sue you as an individual? Do I sue your company? Some of those questions can be answered through corporate strategy. Again, using the hurdle analogy, how many hurdles does that individual have to jump over to get at you personally? Some of the things that we probably don't have time to cover today is how that would actually play out. Because it's one of those deals where if you're going to be in business at some point, you're probably going to get a letter from an attorney. That's just the nature that we are in. It doesn't mean that they're going to be successful. It doesn't mean that they're actually going to be able to hit you personally, but it's not going to stop some attorney somewhere from drafting a petition or sending a demand letter. And the idea and the goal ultimately of the LLC structure is to set up something that gives you a buffer so that you can either win sooner in a lawsuit through summary judgment, through motions to dismiss, or if you know the doomsday scenario of a nuclear option does happen where you do get hit with some liability, you've got a little bit of a shield to protect your assets personally, to protect your bank accounts, to protect your 401ks, to protect your cars, and that so to speak. And the LLC structure kind of gives you some of that stuff. The other thing that LLCs are really good at doing is just increasing how you feel about yourself professionally. We did a lot of homework before we opened up our law firm about, you know, how do we set up, what structure do we use? Do we even have office space? Right? Nowadays, all you need is an internet wireless card and a coffee shop. You can do business just about anywhere. Our industries are very similar in that regard, in that I don't necessarily have to have a brick and mortar space to be successful. That being said, having an office to go to might help you get up in the morning, might give you a reason to put a suit on. Most of the individuals that we talked to as we set our firm up, that was the #1 thing that they said: get someplace that you have to go. You know, even though you can operate out of your house, you need to have somewhere to go. You need to have a reason to go to work. You need to have a space that is nothing but your job. And setting up the LLCs gives you some of that feeling. You're now a business owner, you've got the entrepreneurial deal, it gives you avenues and options to get involved in other things. You can bring in partners. And now you have something more than just a name that you can brand with. It's better than just a DBA. It's better than just, Joe Blow Real Estate Team. It's now Joe Blow Real Estate Team, and this corporation and this company can now be used as the conduit for other things. This company can now be the company and the entity that covers payroll for some staff that you may want to hire as an individual. This company and this entity may give you the avenue and the pathway to cover expenses for other realtors to come in kind of on your, under, of course, the broker's license, but then connected more solely to you and your individual real estate team. This LLC gives you the ability to truly track what is coming in and what is going out. It gives you something to sign contracts on behalf of. If you want to, as an individual, go out and start running stuff via radio, or you want to sign up for like something with Haibu to start doing some organic media, it gives you something to sign on behalf of, right? It's no longer Joe Blow individual, it's now Joe Blow, manager of XYZ LLC, right? And those all go towards increasing your limited liability protection. The key thing to remember with an LLC is just act like an LLC, right? Once it's set up, use it. Make sure that everything you sign is on behalf of the LLC. Make sure that when you interact with individuals, they know that they're dealing with a company. A lot of times it's kind of fun. Every year we get together with all of our corporate clients and we do our annual meetings. In the state of Iowa, we have to file a biennial report every other year. LLCs are odd years, corporations are even years. So all of our LLCs we did meetings for this year also had to file documents with the Secretary of State's office saying, hey, we're still here, we're still active, and please don't administratively dissolve us. A lot of our LLCs are single member LLCs, meaning that there's only one person that owns anything of the LLC. Go.
LLCs go across state lines?
They can, but you typically have to file some sort of like foreign entity filing with the Secretary of State's office. I'm not familiar with some of the surrounding states, but I know if like a Minnesota company wants to come and do business here, they will typically file something with the Secretary of State's office saying, hey, we're a Minnesota company, but we want to be acknowledged by Iowa. You don't necessarily have to do that to just do business across state lines, but if you want to be fully protected and open an office in Omaha, then you're probably going to want to file something so that Nebraska at least recognizes your LLC status. Makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Where's that before that?
Reports by annually.
Oh, yeah. So you end up with a really weird scenario when you do your annual meeting, because the annual meetings are going to be set up with you in a room. Maybe you're by yourself, maybe you're at my office, maybe you're at other attorney's office. Maybe you decided to do a corporate retreat and you're sitting on the beach in Florida doing your annual meeting. But most of the entities that we set up are going to be manager-managed LLCs, right? And there's two types of LLCs from a ownership standpoint. There's member-managed LLCs and there's manager-managed LLCs. The structure of both are the same, right? You both have members. The distinguishing characteristic, though, is how are decisions made? Decisions in a member-managed LLC are made by the members, right? Now, you would think that a single member LLC, I'm the person making the decisions because I'm the only member. In those situations, they're really, really simple because the member is the one that gets to make the decisions, and then the member has a meeting once a year to approve the conduct they did in the past and authorize the conduct moving forward. We have started to move away from simple member-managed LLCs, and we're doing more manager-managed LLCs. A couple of reasons for that. If you go back to the hurdle analogy, having one more layer helps a little bit as far as the limited liability protections that an LLC can afford you. As a member, at some point you may do something that looks like you commingled assets, maybe use their own bank account, maybe something went down, and some attorney somewhere is going to try to say, oh, we should disregard your LLC. We should pierce the corporate veil and come after you individually because it's just a shell company. It's just an alter ego. You're not really a corporation. This is a sham deal. There are some cases that have come out of Texas where some LLCs, member managed LLCs, have been pierced because they set the company up and then they don't do their annual meetings. They set the company up and they don't run it through, run the funds or the income or the expenses through a business account. They run it through their personal stuff, right? So, they don't check enough of the boxes to actually afford themselves the protection. They make it look good, but it's a facade. That has led us to start doing more manager managed LLCs. It creates one more layer, right? Because now the members have to elect a manager. Think about it in corporate terms, the shareholders elect the board of directors. The amount and number of managers that you have is not limited to the amount and number of members that you have. What does that mean? Well, that means if you're a husband-wife duo and wife wants to do the real estate stuff and husband is doing another ancillary service, but both want to have input, well, wife is the only one that holds a member unit ownership interest in the LLC. Wife is only owner, 100% owner. But it's a manager managed LLCs, and you assign 2 managers, right? So now husband and wife can both affect how decisions are made in that entity, because you don't have to be a member to be a manager, right? At another level, another way to look at it is if you get to a point where you need to have office admin or you need somebody who can run kind of the day-to-day operations, you want to step back from that a little bit and just sell houses, well, you can actually assign a manager. You can bring somebody in and hire them as a manager and give them the roles and responsibilities and delegate management authority of the corporation or the LLC to that individual. So the manager-managed LLCs are kind of where we run a lot of times, because it increases the amount of flexibility on who can affect decisions, who can sign on behalf of the company, who can actually pull the trigger on stuff. It also gives you kind of one more layer internally in the LLC from a liability standpoint. But it does create I'll come back around full circle, it does create a really weird environment for the corporate meeting, because you're sitting there on your own, and I like to use hats, right? You're sitting there with one hat on as the individual. Well, you're going to take that hat off and you're going to put on your member hat. And you're going to have a meeting with yourself. Hey, are you here? Yes, I'm here. Hey, how did we do last year? Hey, we did great. And you're going to approve all the conduct, and you got to elect a manager, right? You have to have a full member meeting. That member meeting, you can approve buildings that you purchased. You can talk about insurance that you want to take out. You can approve key person insurance. You can talk about, anything that you want to address from a corporate standpoint that you feel needs to be reflected in the minutes, right? So you have your member meeting. Well, now you elect yourself as manager, right, through the member. You take off your member hat, you put on your manager hat, and you basically have the same meeting, but as a manager, right? Because the members in a manager-managed LLC no longer control the company. The manager does. So the members are simply putting everything up, making sure the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, and then telling the manager, hey, manager, you go forth and do the stuff that you need to do, right? You're the same person. So it requires a little bit of cognitive dissonance to sit down and really bifurcate who you are at what time and what role you're operating within. But the manager is then going to have their meeting. It's going to be reflected in the minutes of the meeting. So an annual meeting set up for an LLC that's manager managed is going to require the members to meet, to elect the manager or managers, for the managers to meet, and then minutes reflect in that meeting. And then once that is set up, you do that once a year, you're pretty much good to go. Every other year, you file with the Secretary of State's office to say, hey, I'm still here, right? For LLCs, it's odd years. For corporations, it's even years. And then from there, you're off and running. It's important at this juncture, once you're operational, to have your team in place, to have a P&C insurance folk, to have your accountant. And at this juncture, you want somebody that's more than just a tax preparer. You want to make sure that whoever you get plugged in from the CPA side of the house is somebody that you can call in August, in October, to say, hey, here's where we're at right now. Is there anything we need to do before the end of the year through the company? Should I buy something? Should I sell something? Should I keep some money in there? So that you have some planning from year to year to really maximize that LLC structure and really maximize that corporate protection. And ultimately, we want to keep as many of the dollars that we make as we can. And setting up the LLCs gives you a dedicated, legitimate entity to run stuff through. And maybe you pay yourself a salary. Salaries are taxed differently than dividends and draws. You know, how that's going to work is going to be dependent on your individual tax needs, your individual income, and that's why having a solid CPA who understands more than just tax preparation is key, because they're going to be able to look at your individual situation and tell you how you should structure some stuff. Should you pay the expense? Should your company pay the expense? Cell phone, internet, DirecTV, maybe. The trip that you want to take out in Arizona, right? Can that be considered a corporate retreat? How much of that can be written off? Meals and entertainment. Can you buy tickets for sporting events, lunches, you know, meals, gifts, bottles of wine, or koozies, right? Having that corporate entity gives you a dedicated, legitimate enterprise to then run a lot of that stuff through to determine how we're going to keep more of your actual dollars, right? Where's that expense going to come from? Who's going to be responsible for it? You, or is it going to come through the company, above the line, below the line, and whatnot? But having the CPA, once these entities are set up, is probably the most important next step, especially from the realtor's standpoint, because how that money gets classified when it comes in, what you're able to do with those dollars as they come in, and how they can be used to reduce your taxable income is going to be an ongoing conversation. Do you set up a dedicated salary, or do you just take draws every time money comes through? Well, that's going to be factors that are going to be, you need cash flow, because it doesn't make sense to pay yourself a salary if your commissions aren't enough or you don't have enough in the bank, right? You may make all your money the first quarter, set yourself up a salary in January, and then by the time you hit July or August, you've taken the money from a salary standpoint. Maybe that's gone now, right? So you need to make sure you've got enough of a bank to fund whatever salary you would want to set up. Sometimes it takes a couple of years to get to that point. Personally, we set up our corporate structure from the law firm perspective in kind of a unique way. We've layered ourselves a little bit. So my partner and I are both professional corporations. Our corporations are then partners in the limited liability firm. We're limited liability partners in our firm. So the firm itself is an LLP. Each of us are incorporated as a professional corporation. So I myself, I'm not even a partner in my own law firm, but through my individual company. That enables us to do a whole host of things. My company gets the money from the LLP, waterfalls down. And then my personal company is the one that pays my salary. I can use draws. It also allows me to pay for different expenses than the company might. I can run different things through. Maybe these meals are going to be covered by me, not my company. Maybe this trip is going to be covered by me, not my company. And it gives me one more entity or one more thing to then run stuff through. It also, in the analogy of the hurdle analogy, it gives me one more thing to have somebody have to jump through if they want to try to get to me personally. Questions at this point?
Is there a suggestion on how much you should have in the LLC, like bank account, like a reserve fund?
Sure. That's going to be driven primarily on what you want to do with your LLC. There is no set rule that says an LLC needs to maintain this amount of funds. Now, an LLC does need to have some money into it, right? Because when you look at the checklist for piercing the corporate veil, was your corporation or was your entity actually funded? That's one of the criteria. So you need to have as much money in there as you need to have. I know it's kind of a really lawyerly answer. But if you're going to start running payroll, you're going to hire staff, you want to make sure that your LLC has enough money in it to actually cover that payroll. If you're going to sign long-term contracts with ad agencies, you need to make sure that your corporation can cover that. A golden rule of thumb is to have a year's worth of bills saved in reserve in case something just goes to hell in a handbasket. But that's where the practicality and the rules kind of differ a little bit or derail a little bit. Because just like you may have a situation tax-wise that's beneficial to you. If I take these steps, I'm going to get a beneficial tax treatment. But practically speaking, taking those steps completely washes your cash flow. Right? So even though you may benefit on the tax side of the house, your actual real dollar effect or how that's going to affect your month-to-month budget or your month-to-month bill pay, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. That is true with how much money you keep in your LLC. You may say, hey, I want to keep this amount in my LLC, or I want to get to this goalpost, but you still got your mortgage, you still got your car payment, you still got your heat, right? So practically speaking, what I typically tell folks to do is to set milestones and benchmarks. As you first start out, most companies run a month-to-month analysis. How did we do last month? Oh, we made money last month. Cool. Well, how are we going to do this month? God, I hope I eat. right? Eventually, as that starts to become more consistent and you start to build up a bank, you're able to go from month to month analysis to quarter analysis. Now it's no longer a matter of to have a good month, to have a bad month, because you can weather bad months, right? You're more concerned about how did I do this quarter? And then as you can probably guess, you go from quarter to yearly, you go from yearly to year blocks. And eventually you have enough data to then look back through your history and say, okay, this is where I'm at in my bills. This is what my average bank account balance has been. This is how we can run. And, maybe at that point, it's when you actually set up your salary. I'm going to pay myself this amount of money every single month, bar none. And then once a quarter, I'm going to take a distribution or a draw, right? But it's more important to set up something that is individual to you. And that's where the LLC structure can really benefit, because you're limited only by your imagination, not only what your LLC can do, but how it's structured, what types of things you run through it, what types of expenses are covered, how you make it work for you is going to be unique to your situation and how you want to run. Some realtors are happy just running on their own under a broker's license and just going. Some like to team up for certain things. An LLC structure, you're going to team up for certain things. Maybe you want to get involved in some actual land development. Maybe you want to start doing individual projects that are real estate centered, but not necessarily buyer, seller, realtor jobs. That LLC would give you that opportunity to kind of partner on some of those side deals and give you something else that you could then market or use, right? If that makes sense. Okay, sir.
Is there any limitations on where funds can move into that LLC from outside sources?
If you do an S election, so a lot of folks are familiar with the term S corp. I like to try to differentiate. I like to further define that with it's an entity that makes an S election, right? A corporation can make an S election and avoid that double taxation, right? So a corporation can set itself up through the IRS to be taxed like a partnership or taxed like an LLC by finally making the S election. That restricts a lot of times, though, what that company can do. You may not be able to have any foreign money or any foreign owners come in. You may be limited to 100 members or 100 shareholders total. What was some of the other ones? Oh, you can't have different classes of stock or different classes of membership interest. Everybody has to be on the same playing field, meaning that for the LLC, you can't set up equity and non-equity or decision-making and non-decision-making membership units, right? You can get really creative with your LLC stuff and set up multiple classes of membership units, right? Class A membership units are going to be individuals that sit at the table. They can hold manager roles. Class B, they don't necessarily get to help make decisions. Maybe they just get a dividend or they get paid back using a certain formula. Maybe you have membership interest that looks a lot like debt financing. Hey, I have an angel investor who wants to help me on this project. We're going to run it through my LLC, but this individual wants ownership along with an amount of money back so that they can direct the company if they don't feel that I'm doing a good job, right? So you can set up a class of ownership to allow and accommodate for that using your operating agreement, using partner agreements, using internal documents to define the rules. As far as who can put money in or where that money can come from, aside from those limitations, there really aren't a whole lot. Obviously you want to stay away from drug money. You want to stay away from, you don't want to be subject to a RICO deal. Those aren't they make for a good story and a book deal afterwards, but no, as far as limitations on where money can come from, there's not a whole lot of them, unless you start going down the road of the S election. Now, why would somebody file an S election on an LLC, right? It's passed through. It's a disregarded entity. Everything goes, right to you anyway, right? That's the main benefit of an S election on a corporation, avoiding that double taxation. A lot of times I'll see folks do an LLC with an S election if they want to try to limit, reduce, or eliminate self-employment tax. So you can still do an S election on an LLC, but that may restrict where some funds and finances can come from. Most of the time, that's going to center around foreign investment. They don't want individuals from Russia coming in and put money down on your corporation, or the types of owners that you can have, nationalities of the owners that you can have. That's where your limitations are probably going to come from.
Where in our career do you suggest establishing an LLC?
Immediately.
Like, even if we're not, I'm still not even a year into this. So income wise, I don't know.
And that's where, the LLC structure is really, really quite cool because the cost to necessarily set it up is nominal. The maintenance on it is nominal, but the benefits on it are kind of everlasting, right? And the earlier, it's just like anything else, the earlier that you set something up, the more tailor-made you can make that as it goes, right? It can grow with you, it can change with you, and you're not having to then put this corporate structure into a box that you've already built. You can build your box around this corporate structure, right? Your website, your domain names, your email addresses, your marketing, your branding doesn't have to be redone if you have everything set up ahead of time. How that money flows, where that money comes through, doesn't have to get redone down the road. Contracts that you enter into 2, 3, 4 years from now don't have to be shifted or changed because now it's always been done under the LLC. It's one of those deals that it doesn't require so much energy. It makes sense to do as early as you can because then you're not reinventing the wheel down the road. You're always operating underneath that brand and you can determine how that brand is used because it's impossible to know what doors are going to open, 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now. And let's say you don't do real estate anymore. That company is still there, right? This isn't a realtor specific LLC. This LLC can do anything. Now, if you want to bring in partners, if you want to do other stuff, you may need to modify it and update your operating agreement, right? Because if you're going to start letting things and people come in and out of the company, you don't want to lose control of your company. You want to make sure that there's good rules to kick somebody out, right? If there's poison, if there's bad blood. But you're setting something up that is yours. You have control of it that you can shift and run. You can run any number of businesses through it. You can run any number of entities through it because you're not limited in the industries that you would go into with this LLC. And that's where I think, the LLC it's one of those deals where it's so easy to set up. It just makes sense to do as soon as you can.
So don't use the real estate name then.
You can. I mean, you totally can because the name itself is something that can be changed, right? What you're doing is you're setting up an entity. Just like a kid that turns 18 and wants to change their name, you can change the name of the company. You can set up the name of the company to be something that's meaningful to you that has nothing to do with real estate. And then for $5, you can file doing business as and have an unlimited number of DBAs on that, right? So your company itself can be named whatever you want. And then through a $5 fictitious name filing, you can operate under whatever name you choose to operate under for whatever given deal. And that's another route that it's really beneficial to just kind of set it up and get it done because then as things come around, you may just have to file a DBA to then start operating under a different name. But your EIN doesn't change.
What's EIN?
Employer identification number. Think of it as like the social security number for your entity. It's what the IRS is going to use to track it. It's when you start filing taxes and you start giving yourself K1s and whatnot, that's going to be the number that gets used. When you open a bank account, instead of having it connected to your individual social security number, the bank account is going to be opened under the EIN. If your entity seeks credit card, line of credit, any of that type of stuff, it's going to be done hopefully through the EIN of the corporation, not through your personal social security number. So it just gives you kind of one more thing that you can hide behind a little bit to push your identity away from the corporation. Other questions? Yes.
So on our daily day-to-day business as a real estate agent, showing houses, selling houses, writing contracts, all that type of stuff, explain to me how the LLC is going to protect us from liability in that sense.
Well, and that's where step one is just have a really solid process. And you guys learn all this when you go through your classes. Make sure you document, the disclosures. Make sure you're telling folks what you need to. From the standpoint of like E&O type coverage, you could probably get separate coverage through your LLC. In addition, think about it almost as an umbrella policy, so to speak. Insurance rep's going to have to speak on that. But as far as personal liability, it just gives you one more hurdle, right? It may create a situation where seller's disclosures, that tends to be where people go most for litigation. So I got water in my basement, and that realtor didn't tell me X, Y, and Z. Most of the time your E&O is going to cover it, so long as you follow your process. Most of the time it's going to come up to the broker, right? That attorney is probably going to sue you. That attorney is going to sue the broker. That attorney is going to sue Remax as a whole, because they're going to look at it like a potluck. They're going to try to bring as many people to the table as they can, and they don't care who does the dishes. They just want a pot of money, right? And what they really want is that insurance check, because they know that most realtors aren't going to be able to cover personally some of the damages that come out. That's why we have, that's why I have malpractice. But it goes back to that hurdle analogy, right? It gives you one more thing to stand behind and say, hey, I was never acting on behalf of myself. I wasn't an individual. I didn't enter into these agreements as an individual. The contract to sell that we entered into with the folks, I didn't sign it. My company signed it, right? I told them, look at all my marketing stuff. It says so-and-so LLC on all my business cards, right? All of my correspondence, all my email, my signature block, manager of LLC, whatever that would be. And so it just kind of gives you one more thing to hide behind a little bit. But ultimately, that is going to be addressed more specifically just through the realtor structure, right? The fact that you have to have a broker, the fact that you have to have that covers all that stuff, the fact that most of you guys are going to work underneath or around somebody else. But it just gives you one more thing to kind of hide behind. How it would practically benefit you, I hope you never have to find out, because that is one of those situations where you don't know how it'll play out until you're faced with that situation, because it is so fact intensive, right? If you didn't maintain separate bank accounts, if you didn't act as a company, if you didn't sign anything on behalf of the corporation, if you commingled assets, if you were paying too many of your personal expenses out of your corporate expense, then there may be no benefit, right? So how that would play out is going to be based a lot on the situation that occurred. It's going to be based a lot on what gets brought. Right? If they bring a seller disclosure action against you in your agency, that's a lot different than if they bring a personal fraud action against you because they feel that you lied, right? And I see that more in dual agency representation situations where they try to go after that individual, that realtor personally, because they're standing in between. At what point, what is a fiduciary? What's my role? What's my responsibility? That's a whole other conversation for a different day. But that gives you one more thing that you can kind of stand behind and go, hey, this wasn't me as an individual. This is how I operated. This is what I've done. This is my corporation.
So in order to have that protection though, every single time that I sign something, it has to be Emily agreed before XYZ LLC.
Yep, on behalf of, act like a company, get treated like a company. The more that you can notice people that you're operating as an entity and not as a person, the better off you're going to be. And in this situation, it's a lot like independent contractor versus employee conversations. There is no bright line rule or a line in the sand that we can say, if you do these 12 things, you will always be okay. Because a lot of them are intangible. A lot of them operate in the gray. They're not weighted the same, right? If all you do is set up a company and then you don't do anything else from a corporate formality standpoint, you're probably going to have your veil pierced, right? But on the other end, as long as you do absolutely everything, you dot all I's, you cross all T's, you're probably not going to have your veil pierced. It's that middle ground on, how did you act? How do people know you? What did you sign? What have you done? That's going to get looked at in hindsight, right? So the more you can do to utilize that company, the more you can do to let people know that, hey, I have this entity and this is who you're doing business with. You're doing business with my company. And I'm telling you this because all of my marketing materials say that. I have LLC after all of my name stuff on my business cards. I sign all my documents on behalf of or as manager of blah, 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 right? You just try to check as many of those boxes as you can to increase that protection. Really lawyerly answer, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So besides notifying your CPA, do you need to notify anybody else that you're moving forward with an LLC?
Whoever you do business with, right? Everybody kind of has their own network of business individuals. And it's really about finding a team that works for you. You want to make sure that your attorney, you got their number on, so if something does come up, you can get a quick answer on that. You want to make sure that your CPA knows what you're doing and how you're doing it. Your insurance rep, both your personal and your PNC, you're probably going to want to make sure that they know, right? Maybe have a conversation with E&O to say, hey, I'm doing this. Is there anything that you need my operating agreement to say? Anybody that you're connected to from a business standpoint, you probably want to have a conversation with, just to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to put a little bit of input in their specific lane. I'm a really big believer in letting individual roles just, fill their role.
So in our case, we just notify our broker that we're moving to an LLC then? Or?
Yep.
And if you were going to be having a bank account set up, we would need to know that because you have to fill out the W-9 with that information versus your personal information. So,
How about through Dotloop, when we sign off on Dotloop? Have to change that up too?
yep.
So how does that work then, since we're individually licensed as agents
That's what
and not the company? Can you explain how that works? Because that.
I don't know how it works with their real estate commission.
Well,
They're
so, and-
picky.
And realtors are in a weird spot because of that overlap, right? And from the standpoint, I guess, whoever your broker is probably going to have to determine where those fees get paid or how stuff gets transferred in and out. I don't get involved with that section so much because quite frankly, I don't want to give you guys wrong advice from a realtor standpoint. You guys are very similar to financial services industries in that certain commissions can only be paid to certain things, and you can only make money on certain deals, and you have to be able to do X, Y, and Z before you get paid for ABC. So sometimes it may be just a matter of setting the structure up and then identifying where the money goes and how it goes there. Right? The money goes to you first individually, then maybe it goes from you back to the company, and you fund the company, and you use that as like a cash infusion, right? It may be able to get paid directly to you through the company, right? Maybe you can get to the EIN, maybe they can pay the company directly. Those are going to be things that your office, your agency would then kind of work out, right? So once that structure is set up, identifying logistically how money flows in and how money flows out, that's going to be kind of that next step. But it's really about having that protection in place so that you have that entity to then have that conversation. Because practically speaking, the logistics of making it work is some of the easiest stuff, right? Once it's set up and running, then it's just a matter of figuring out, okay, how do I use this and what avenues can this be beneficial to me? And that's where having conversations with the insurance rep, having conversations with your broker, and figuring out logistically how that's going to work from a day-to-day practical standpoint is going to benefit you as an individual, because your situation may be different than some others. You may be able to have different types of money come into this. I do some work for some realtors that have like actual graphic design or marketing pieces to their real estate portfolio, I guess, or their business. They run a lot of this stuff through their entity itself. And you're really just trying to set up that kind of flexibility.
So do any agents change their name on their real estate license to LLC?
That's
No.
what I don't know that you can. That's what
No.
I'm trying to figure out. Because then we're required, like, the real estate commission is so picky that
Right.
if we can't act like we're somebody else different than our license.
I don't believe I've ever had a realtor change their name on the license. It's really just a matter of where the funds get funneled to
Okay.
and how the check gets cut.
But Becca, you're saying that can be changed to where our commissions get paid to
Well, yeah,
our
and that's an
company
easy change,
versus us.
right? Like, the credit card authorization, the direct deposit, that all can be changed to your LLC and your W-9.
And
That would be
that's enough for protection. Doesn't matter what our license says,
Because our license and
Yeah,
everything
they're-
we sign is gonna be under our name.
under our individual name.
Correct, but those are kind of different, right? One's granting you the authority just to do the job, right? Same with like the
Okay.
law license, right? They can't license my company, they can license me. And quite frankly, I don't want my corporation to hold my license, right? I want to hold my license because now my license isn't connected to this corporation. I may have 4 other corporations where that license can be of use and benefit. I want to make sure that I maintain ownership of that. And that may be a better way to look at it, right? You own the license and you're just using the license through the corporation. But as far as who gets paid, how that gets paid, that's going to be something that you work at internally through your agency.
So that is what you would sign with the LLC. You wouldn't sign purchase agreement, or, listing
Because,
agreement.
yeah,
Right.
I know that.
You wouldn't sign known as.
Yeah.
Right.
with the LLC.
Right.
I understand.
But if you're doing contracts with like vendors, if you're doing contracts with other folks, then yes, that is where making sure you're signing on behalf of the super critical.
So like if you land a gig with a builder,
Mhm.
you'd sign under your LLC.
Well, I would,
And be a realtor underneath that LLC that has the signs in the yard.
I would say that it would depend on how you sign with them, right? If you're signing listing agreements under your license, that's one thing, right? If you're signing contracts, like long-term contracts that look more like third-party vendor services or That doesn't make sense. Like the type of contract that you sign with them and how you're going to be utilized with them is going to determine and dictate how that gets done, right? If you're actually going to partner with them and you're going to be this arm of their entity, they may want to pay you differently than if all they're just hiring you as a realtor, right? Because at that point, they're not hiring you as a realtor, they're almost bringing you on as a partner in a sense, right? Or they're bringing you on in the specific capacity to help market and sell, this block of houses. Well, in that situation, it may not be your typical or standard, buyer-seller real estate agreement as far as to sell or to represent a buyer. It may be something different than that. You may be entering into an actual contract, like an independent contractor agreement, so to speak. So the capacity of the role that you're going to play or fill is going to dictate how you sign that. Kind of going back to your deal, if you're just going to sign, hey, I'm going to sell these 2 houses for you, then you're probably just going to sign it as an individual underneath your license. If you're going to engage them, or they're going to bring you on in a more detailed capacity, so that you're doing more than just selling those properties for them, it's going to be a different commission structure. It's going to be a different deal. Perhaps you actually enter into some other type of agreement that more clearly defines what those rules are, that more clearly defines who's paying for the marketing, where does the money come from, who's responsible for X, Y, and Z. If this doesn't work and you can't get stuff done, like you said, how do I come out? Are there any exclusions as far as what other realtors can come in? Are there any exclusions on who else I could sell for? Right? And the answers to those questions, you may want to sign an agreement like that through your entity or through your corporation, right? Because now it's more than just buying and selling. You've got ancillary things onto that deal. You've got restrictions that are on there. You've got trapdoors that get you out of the agreement. You've got splits of money, right? You've got identification of marketing materials. You have representation and warranties that both sides are now going to have to adhere to. I'm going to do this, and if I don't, you can do this. I'm going to do this, and if you don't, and if I don't, you can do this, right? You're putting more stuff on the shoulders of the individual players. I used to be able to give yes or no answers. My wife tells me I used to be able to give yes or no answers. It's been years. It's been a long time. What are the questions you guys have? I covered a ton of material. And these are things that we could talk about for days. I could give hours and hours and hours on LLC formations, reasons to do it. If you have questions, talk to your attorney. If you have questions, talk to your CPA. The best thing that you can do is educate yourself on how this could be used for you. You may come to the conclusion after talking to everybody that an LLC at this point just doesn't make sense. There are very few situations where I can see that becoming a reality, but it happens. I've had individuals in my office that want to talk about layering, right? Setting up parent corporations and waterfalling stuff down. And I've told them that, it's just not time yet. We're not going to do that. You're not ready. So identifying how this could be utilized for you is going to just require you to kind of look in the mirror internally and say, okay, what could I do with this? Talk to the CPA. If I had this entity, what kind of benefits could I do? Look long-term. Where do you want to be 3, 5, 10 years from now? And how could this play into that? Do you have other individuals that you may want to bring to the table? Are you looking to try to grow? Right? If you think you're going to have staff and employees and realtors underneath you, then an LLC makes complete sense. Right? Some folks, this is more of a hobby. They got other gigs and they do real estate on the side for other stuff. Those individuals may not need the LLC yet. But knowing that you're limited only by your imagination is a pretty cool thing. And knowing that you have the ability to create something that you could then use, to act underneath, through, and with, I think is kind of cool. So that's what I've got, unless there's any other questions.
Great.
How do you do on time?
Perfect. It's 11:59. Look at that.
Well, I'd say normally I like to be a little more structured with agendas and PowerPoints, but this kind of came up quick, so I figured we just cover the nitty gritty and get you the fast and furious facts.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for